Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium's Capstone webinar, the fifth in a series of webinars on increasing supply chain maturity to improve your bottom line outcomes for your company. This is an online benchmark assessment and utilizing a little bit of AI and ML to make it all come together. We appreciate your time today and taking that time to meet with us today on the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium Supply Chain Management Assessment. And we'll be guiding you through the assessment and as well as providing you what are those outcomes that you can gain, your company can gain by performing this assessment, and looking forward to indoctrinating that into your planning process. Today, we are on our fifth webinar of the series. There's 4 other webinars, and you're welcome to view those at any time on the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium's websites. And again, this is an interactive webinar. We would love to get your questions in the chat or Q&A. Please do enter them at any time. And we'll leave the survey open up until we go through that in a few minutes. My name is Jim Vries, founder of Enhance International Group and partner of the consortium, the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium. And with us today, we have Greg Schlegel, who is going to share his vast experience in supply chain risk management, as well as supply chain management, as he was the former Apex president of Apex ASCM. Greg, a few words?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jim. Thanks, folks, for joining us today to talk about our passion. We have a lot to share with you. I'm the founder of the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium. As Jim mentioned, we've been in business for 13 years. We'll give you a little thumbnail sketch about the consortium in a minute. I've taught supply chain risk for 10 years at Lehigh University here in the States, and I still teach ERM, Enterprise Risk Management, at Villanova University here in the States as well. Spent 8 years as a supply chain executive for IBM. Spent 35 years, like perhaps many of you on the call, as a supply chain exec and practitioner for a couple of Fortune 100s. I've taught SCM at 6 different US universities during my career. And as Jim mentioned, Apex past president way back when in the late 90s. So great to be here with you. Thanks a lot for joining us, and back to you, Jim.
Thanks, Greg. And we'll just go ahead and get on with it with the background on the consortium.
Sure.
Thanks.
We said we'd give you a thumbnail sketch of who we are and what we do. On the right-hand side are the company logos. I think we have about 31 companies right now. That's about 1,600 supply chain risk professionals around the globe. As you can see, we more or less break out our capabilities into 3 pillars: education, consulting, and software as a service. All right. So you can take a look at it. We have a lot of capabilities. On the left-hand side are what we consider our 5 product and service areas. Real quick, we have 2 online certificate courses. One's a basic course in supply chain risk and resiliency. You can achieve a certificate as you go through that self-paced evaluation. The other course is geared specifically towards service, logistics, and public health care types of companies. And again, they're online, self-paced. You get a year to fill them out. We do coaching and consulting. You know, we lead, guide, direct, and coach companies on their supply chain and risk journey. We have platform solutions. Most of them are software as a service, and they're geared specifically into doing heavy lifting for supply chain risk and resiliency. And then finally, we have 2 new online assessments. The first is the online supply chain management readiness assessment. That's what we're going to focus on today. that talks about best in class, process maturity, industry benchmarking. That is an online assessment tool. And the newest is a prescriptive online risk 90-day action plan that gets into depicting what your risk maturity is, what your risk appetite is, what your risk culture and operating style is, all using AI and ML algorithms. So we're pretty busy. We're pretty excited. Going to be another interesting year. Thanks for joining us. And I'll turn it back to Jim.
Thanks, Greg. And just a bit of background on myself and my company, Enhance International Group. We're a group of, or exchange of passionate experts. We have about 50 companies, consultants, and SaaS providers that are focused on enabling your enterprise to perform at a higher performance. And we like to liken it to what we call the bicycle slide that we developed a number of years ago on strategy to execution. And so that's the ecosystem that we have modeled it, linking strategy to execution. Those two geared wheels are connected via a chain, and the strategy wheel being the larger of the two wheels. So one single rotation of the strategy wheel will result in many execution cycles. And if you become derailed, of course, your strategy and your execution aren't linked, of course, then that would not be good. And then the other way to look at it is the strategy wheel does move at a slower rotation than execution. And so a solid strategy will result in many execution rotation cycles. In summary, a strongly linked strategy to execution ecosystem results in positive momentum, resulting in positive momentum and growth for your company and scalable growth for the employees, customers, employees, and stockholders. Quoting Albert Einstein, life is like a bicycle. To keep your balance, you need to keep on moving. So with that, we'll keep moving here on the series. Again, webinar 1 focused on supply chain management, best-in-class benchmarking as a single user. The second webinar was focused on discovering your strengths and weaknesses of your business, looking at it from the strategic, tactical, and operational strength levels. Then we went into benchmarking from an industry perspective, and then how to align your performance to your action plan of your company, which is tier 3. We'll get into that. And then tier 4 is the readiness playbook for your company that's tailored for exactly what your company needs. And today we're looking at really how do you sell this to your company through looking at some benefits, case studies, and how to build readiness for your company for supply chain risk and resiliency. So that's what we'll be covering today. And with that, Greg?
You bet. We wanted to spend a real quick minute or two sharing with you a statement from our friends at Gartner about what 2023 probably will look like. And the underlining theme is why organizations are tightening up their supply chains this year. So that is really the underlining theme of our webinar today. And so what they did is they asked execs early in February of this year, what top 3 wildcard risks are you most concerned will disrupt your business and supply chain in 2023? Now, yes, it's an opinionated statement and response, but the top 3 look like this: geopolitical escalation, hot war, trade war, cyber attack, 8 out of 10, not surprising there. Stubborn inflation, central bank tightening, which is going on right now here in the US and elsewhere in Europe, and a potential recession. And then the third was energy market shocks. Again, the pricing and supply, demand and supply equal pricing. So after the top 3, it drops off pretty precipitously. But the net is, with that backdrop, I'll pass it over to Jim and we'll talk more about the elements of the online assessment tool. Jim?
Thanks, Greg. So with that, we'll talk about the webinar deliverables. The first deliverable is focused on what level of maturity are you, and where are you, and where are you going? And the second deliverable is how do you compare with others from a benchmark perspective, from a best-in-class perspective, from a strategic, tactical, and operational perspective, and then from an industry benchmark perspective, where do you stand? And then the third deliverable is how does this all support the planning for your organization? Let's say an annual operating plan, or how do you make sure that you're always moving forward and build that positive momentum for your company? And then the fourth deliverable is how do you sell it to your management, and the value of this relative to scalability and growth of your company. And we do that, of course, through supply chain best practices and data, and of course the people, roles and responsibilities, and technology. So how do you know what to do in what order? So we all know we want to improve, but the real question is what order to do that in. So we want to cover those topics with you today and have those deliverables. And we put together this agenda to align to that. Again, we'll give you an overview on the supply chain readiness assessment, some industry testimonies of supply chain management readiness, and with 2 case studies. And then we'll look at some value props for the tiers on exactly what's the value for you to complete each one of these tiers, and then the benefits of accelerating time to value, again linking supply chain management to your overall P&L performance. With that, Greg?
You bet. Thanks, Jim. You said we'd talk a little bit about the assessment deliverables. We'll give you an overview, kind of get you grounded again, especially if you've never sat in on the previous 4 webinars that Jim mentioned. So our next slide is pretty much the genesis of the SCM assessment tool, just to give you a sense of where it came from. The tool was born on the right-hand side. It was born out of a first-of-a-kind supply chain risk management course at Lehigh University here in the States. It was so well received within the classroom and in the MBA forum that we took it on the road around 2011, 2012. The tool's been operating for about 10 years. So essentially we have thousands of individual assessments across almost every industry. And we'll share some of them with you later. We've utilized the tool in classrooms, in other universities as well, in workshops, webinars, and client engagements. And we know that we have at least 15 universities around the globe who utilize the tool within their classroom, augmented with our first-of-a-kind book. So we've upgraded the tool within an LMS learning management system platform. So we just wanted to give you a sense of the genesis. I'll give you a quick thumbnail sketch of what you're looking at over on the left-hand side on the chart, if in fact you've never sat with us in previous sessions. You can see it's kind of a Likert type chart. All right, from 0 to 10, we have 13 tenets. We think 13 tenets gives you a good profile of end-to-end supply chain excellence. Then we break the tenets out into different color codes. The blue that you see on the top right are strategic in our view. The red on the bottom right are tactical tenets in your supply chain. And then on the left, the green are what we call operational. So we got blue, red, green. All right. So the consortium has taken our 30 years of supply chain management experience and about 12 or 13 years of risk management, thousands of exercises in terms of individual utilizing the tool, and we developed this readiness assessment that actually provides two assessments for you. One, it assesses your supply chain process maturity, and it also gives you inherent risk within those processes. So let's take a look. You got 13 tenets. That's our point of view of end-to-end supply chain. The star chart is a maturity model depicting how mature a company's supply chain processes are, where, think of it this way, the lower the number, the more mature the process. So talking about it differently, the closer you are to the center from your as-is condition, that indicates that you have a pretty mature supply chain process. As you go through the questions, you can see the company's as-is condition. That's the black line for each one of the tenets. And remember, the farther away you are from the center, the less mature your process is. We said it does two things. It also gives you an inherent level of risk. What we've done is we've developed 3 circles within the chart. You can see the green circle. That's where the exemplar companies tend to operate in from an as-is condition. Then from red through orange, or from green through orange to red, that is less mature supply chain process and more inherent risk. And then if you are at the if you're at or near the red line, we call it the ring of fire. That essentially says that you have very immature processes and that you have more and more risk. So net, it evaluates 2 different types of assessments. One, it measures your supply chain process maturity, and the other is it gives you a sense of your inherent risk within each tenet. So with that, I'll turn it back to Jim.
Thanks, Greg. And with that, we'll just talk about the different tiers. The tier 1 is this free assessment that Greg just went through that you can take by going onto the consortium's website. And tier 2 is looking at drilling it down from a strategic, tactical, and operational level, as Greg talked about, but also looking at it from a business unit perspective. And what we mean by that is we would take in 3 to 8 of your folks to look at what the group thinks. So it's more of a collaboration between your team aligned to a product line. That's what tier 2 is. Tier 3 is we stepped it up and said, okay, now how are you performing relative to other companies within your industry? Number 1, that's the first deliverable. And then we'll talk about that a little bit later. Are you a leader, follower, average, or a laggard? Or second, not or, but and second, we look at how to prioritize your actions from the assessment. So just by looking at the supply chain management, the spider diagram, you might want to look at exactly how to make that improvement. We'll cover that in a few minutes. It's also covered in detail in our webinar number 4. And with that, you get 16 hours of coaching. And then tier 4 offering is centered around working with you to develop an improvement acceleration playbook for you tailored to your business. We'll develop 10 questions to ask your organization on your supply chain management journey. We'll look at on-site or virtual stakeholder interviews. And this is really to help you get ready to launch supply chain risk and resiliency. As we all know, that's a hot topic out there. And every company wants to start launching that program, and we would work with you to make that transition. Again, that coaching has 32 hours. And what we talked about just a few minutes ago is really aligning the survey across your organization. So it's so important that your organization embraces supply chain management across the organization, aligned to a product. So these are the different types of areas in your company that we would suggest to get aligned and take the survey. Again, representation of 5 to 8 folks from each of these areas. One from each area is fine. Generally, a director or general manager is what we're looking for. And what we found that works over time is when there's a single language for supply chain management across the organization. And of course, when you have a single language, things tend to go a little bit smoother. So aligning again from finance, sales, engineering, procurement, operations, manufacturing, and of course your project management folks from IT and operational excellence need to be aligned to your supply chain management journey. With that, we're going to go to the survey results. So thank you for replying on the last time you formed a supply chain assessment. Again, we know that at least a handful of folks have attempted or have completed the survey. So thank you for taking the survey. We'd love to gain your feedback. If you want to enter it in the chat, if you happen to be one of those folks, we'd love to hear your feedback. If you're not, haven't taken it, are looking to take it, please do reach out if you have any questions. But the results here are quite interesting, that we're in first quarter and we don't have anybody taking one in less than a year. So we'd like to see that, more of that, especially at the beginning of the year, that people are taking that as a precursor for your annual operating plan, so you can start moving forward with your supply chain management best practices. Greg, your thoughts?
You bet. Yeah, again, thanks for getting engaged. We always like to watch the what we call the horse race chart here. There's no right or wrong answer, as Jim mentioned, but just think about it in terms of the folks, even folks who have exercised a supply chain assessment, whether it's 1, 2, or 3 years, the disruption level and frequency of disruptions has been tremendous since the pandemic. And more and more, just to give you some salient stats, more and more exemplar companies who we consider supply chain performance and risk management exemplars are assessing their supply chain using modeling and so forth more and more frequently because of the global situation of potential disruption. So just wanted to give you a little insight there. Great to see that almost 40–50% have done something within the last 3 years, because the landscape, folks, is very dynamic and will be dynamic and somewhat disruptive over the next couple of years. So thanks again for getting engaged with the question. All right, with that, we'll go to our next section. We said we had some industry testimonials from the tool, and we actually have 2 case studies that we're going to share with you right now. So let's take a look at, excuse me, the tier 1 on-demand user activity update. We launched our new upgrade last year in August. All right, this is the tool on steroids, if you will, on a learning management platform. It's leveraged by our consortium licensees and partners. We have, excitingly, we have over 150 active users as of April 2nd. You can take a look at the completion rate. We kind of take a look every week in terms of how many users have actually gone through and completed all the questions. Very encouraging to us as we move forward. We're very pleased with the response rate, and we have activity every day. The activity is pretty extensive and it crosses almost every industry you could think of. And we just wanted to share with you a couple of major industries that are well positioned and active in the database. So we're very pleased with that. We have more to share with you. All right. We said we had some testimonials. These come from a couple of years now. in terms of industry execs using the tool to assess their supply chain. We have consumer packaged goods, well known as CPG. What they say, readiness tool was very thorough, truly an end-to-end holistic assessment. Scope was much wider than the individual initially anticipated. That comes from a global CPG exec. We have another one in electronics, commercial electronics. This individual had 3 thoughts, provided a very comprehensive assessment for him, exposed potential areas for further investigation, and required that all their stakeholders got involved. So that came from a electronics VP. We have a couple more. Heavy industrials, all right, across the board. Your assessment was the most complete supply chain management assessment method he has seen to date. And this gentleman was in the business for 40 years. So that was very encouraging. Couple more. Chemicals. They said SCM readiness is a critical success factor in our industry. I'm an old chemical plant manager. I agree. Before the assessment tool, this individual felt that their team had a fairly robust SCM approach. The tool was a terrific wake-up call for the entire team. That was very encouraging. And then finally, we said we had 2 online assessment tools. One is basic and one is geared towards service, logistics, and healthcare. We had several healthcare NGOs make comments as well going through the tool. Very comprehensive. They liked the personas. They were aligned with their organization where they wanted to go. Definitely a tool that this gentleman would recommend to their staff, and which they have. So pretty good. Very pleased to hear these types of assessments. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Jim, and he'll talk a little bit more about the tool.
Thanks, Greg. Great feedback from our customers there. So from a tier 2 perspective, we talked about best-in-class company rankings, and you see the rankings on the right: exemplar, mainstream, apprentice, and ring of fire. Greg went through that earlier in this discussion. And again, exemplars are less than 3, and these companies generally are going to be your folks that have embraced both supply chain management and supply chain risk management over time. And then the mainstream folks between 3 and 6.5, those are the folks that are more, they've made a lot of improvements in their supply chain. They have an active program going on. They are entering the visibility stage with sales, inventory, and operational planning. And that stage from a supply chain risk and resiliency perspective. And they've probably done supply chain management, I would guess, between at least 3 to 5 years actively, and reaped some bottom line benefits from that. So they are indoctrinated and strongly believe in it, but are still in that early journey. The apprentices, they're in that, they're starting it, they're trying it out, they're touching it. The supply chain management best practices probably have some limited successes. From a supply chain risk and resiliency perspective, they're early in the visibility stage, and they continue to dig and scratch for funding and resources to move the supply chain management journey. Probably leadership changes cause them a little bit of strife of sustaining momentum in their organization. And then the ring of fire, as we call it, the greater than 8.5, are folks that are really at that foundational stage, still trying to prove where they're at. Again, as Greg said, there's no right or wrong on where you're at. To me, it's all about how fast are you going? Where are you going? Do you have a plan to improve your supply chain management practices in your company? So gaining that improvement is what we're all about. So that's from the tier 2 perspective, and we want to cover these because the tier 3 is a little bit different, because it's asking, where are you at in your industry? On the right hand side of this slide, you can see this is looking at it from the minimum value in your industry, which are your leaders. to the maximum value, which are going to be your laggards. So you put in 100 different folks putting into an industry. Of course, the leaders are going to have those lowest scores, and the folks performing the poorest are going to be on the maximum scale. And the way the percentiles are, it's not an average. An average does not equal the 50 percentile. Very often that's not true the case. But if you had 100 data points lined up, the 25th data point from bottom to top is going to be the 25th percentile, and the 50th percentile would be the 50th, or the middle point within all that data, and so forth, the 75% percentile being the 75th data point in that group of 100. So with that, the first quartile, again, are your leaders, and then the followers are going to be in that next group, and the average is in that third group, and then of course the laggards are in the bottom tier. And again, to understand where you are and where you're going, that's what we want you to get out of this. There's no good or bad. The worst is not knowing where you're at and not having a plan going forward. With that, Greg, I'm just going to go through.
You bet. You bet. Thanks, Jim, for giving us the tool baseline benchmark data. We just wanted to share with you again. We're not assuming, but if you haven't really sat with us over the course of a couple of months, we wanted to give you a sense of get you grounded on some of the basic elements of the entire assessment tool, not just tier one. We said we'd share with you a couple of caselets. We do. We have two actual healthcare companies that we want to share some of their data with you. So let's go through that. All right. First, on the chart on the left, all right, you can see this company's as is condition when they've gone through the 13 tenets. It's a black line. All right. This basically says how mature their processes are at the point in time where they did the assessment. So they are considered from a best in class up on the top right. We've considered them based on the numbers that Jim gave you. We consider them a mainstream within their industry and based on their best in class status. So we call them mainstream within this picture. Then next, we talk about tier two, which is the STO focus, strategic, tactical, and operational. And we calculate their strengths. All right. What are their strengths? In this particular company, it looks to us that their strength is tactical processes. All right. And then you can see in STO in tier two, the lower the number, the stronger the tenant. So they're strongest in tactical operations. Next strength is strategic, and then third is operational. All right, they're kind of tightly wound if you look at the numbers, and then you can see in the middle chart, the Venn diagram, the sense of the strength is the size of the Venn diagram. So they have their mainstream, their strength is tactical, and then we attempt to profile them based on their industry, the data that we have. And at the moment, this organization seems to be a follower. All right. You might say, well, what do you mean a follower? Well, that's not bad considering they're second out of the 4 tiers, if you want to call them that. So that's not bad. So they're mainstream, their strength is tactical, and their followers, which is 1 level below a leader. Pretty good. You can see the chart on the left again. You can see their as is, and then we superimpose their tier 2 strengths, blue, red, and green. So we wanted to share the data with you, and we have more for you.
So Greg, we have a question.
Yeah,
Excellent
sure.
question. So
Okay.
do appreciate the question. The question is, does the maturity assessment change dramatically with supply chain strategy? For example, the differing strategies that occur between product leaders, operational excellence, and customer intimacy leaders, or does it matter? Great
I'm
question.
not, yeah, it is a good question, but I'm not sure it matters exclusively. I mean, there's probably a cause and effect. I'm thinking out loud here. There's probably a cause and effect, but essentially, remember what we're evaluating. Your processes across all your products, not a one product line, but processes that you have either codified, you might even have them codified in software. What are those and how good are they relative to best in class and your industry? So I hope I answered the question. I tried. All right,
I'll add some color.
go ahead.
So from a supply chain strategy perspective, I think the key is that all these folks are going to have different perspectives of what should be done and what shouldn't be done. And the key here is to gain that alignment across all these folks. And so view this as an alignment tool as much as anything else. So it's not unusual from my experience to see these folks having a little bit different priorities, but by having this conversation, it should drive alignment. I hope that answers the other part of the question that was asked.
Mhm.
With that, we'll go on.
Okay, yep, we'll go on because this is a case study going across all the tiers within the tool. So we wanted to share this, and we talked about, Jim just talked about prioritization. If and when you get into tier 3 and you answer additional questions inside the tool, this essentially gives us the company's improvement prioritization profile. All right. And so in the middle, we ask questions about, all right, here's the 13 tenants. How important to you are these tenants? And then we pit it against their maturity level. So essentially in the middle chart, you see, how important do you feel these tenants are to your supply chain excellence in terms of your maturity? And then what you can see is you can draw a line essentially after the top 3, because they essentially are almost touching or are touching the yellow box, which says you're kind of ready. These are very important. You can see it on the left. What's important to this company? Supply and purchasing, demand management, and being agile. And then on the right-hand side, in tier 3, we ask another set of questions. All right, you told us how important the tenants are, and we rank them for you. Now we ask a question about, well, how dissatisfied are you? Now it's a negative question, but how dissatisfied are you about the 13 tenants? And when they answer those questions, the algorithms go through and essentially say, well, this indicates that this company is ready to make a change. They said what is important, they know their maturity, and now they're saying to us in the survey and the tool, we are pretty ready to improve these particular tenets. And so we're looking to this as another way of laying out a prioritization, what to do first, second, or third, and moving towards what we call a playbook for that particular company. This is what you get out of tier 3, a prioritization. There's more. What you also get out of the tool when you move beyond the free tier 1 is you get a roadmap. And so let's take a look at healthcare number 1. All right, we said they're mainstream. That's pretty good. We said their strength is tactical. And we said from an industry point of view, they're followers, which is second out of 4 levels. What's the action plan? Well, comes out and says, well, maybe you want to focus more on forward-looking issues for supply chain management and risk. Maybe you want to think a little bit more strategically, and then we go into all kinds of tactics to do that. Second one was maybe you want to embrace some new global risk management standards, such as ISO 31000, ERM, GRC, because what it says from a maturity point of view is you are ready to think and act more strategically. Third one, maybe you want to develop some supply chain and supply chain risk talent and skills. Keep doing that constantly. How to put that in there. And then fourth, maybe you want to think about developing some new supply chain KPIs, key performance indicators, and what we call KRIs, key risk indicators. So that is the action plan coming out of, let's say, a tier 3 playbook at the moment, just high level. What did they say? Comprehensive program. The persona was very aligned, as Jim said, to our organization. Definitely a tool that this individual wanted and did, offer to his staff members. So that is the first of 2 case studies. Ready to go to the second. Healthcare company, different profile. Let's take a look at this organization. All right, from a best-in-class segmentation, and if you look on the chart on the left, you can see the black line, which is their as-is condition. And at the moment, you can see the number on the top right, the calculation, and we gave you that range for initially depicting a best-in-class process point of view. From our view, they are apprentices. All right, they're a little bit farther down the maturity line. All right. Second, from a strategic, tactical, and operational focus, their strength at the moment is strategic. Now, it's not that strong, but it's stronger than operational and tactical. And then from an industry benchmark, you saw the numbers, there's the range, they're considered laggards. So they got a lot of work to do. All right, you can see the difference between the 2 organizations from a process maturity point of view. It's readily apparent when you look at the chart. That's why we use the chart. It's a visual depiction, very easy to grab onto and make some assumptions real quick from an observation. So let's take a look at their tier 3. We explained to you that these are additional questions in tier 3 to give us an improvement prioritization profile from the company point of view. What did they say in the middle about what is important to them? Well, you can see they have maybe 3 or 4 different tenets out of 13 that they say are very important to them. Supply and purchasing, logistics, integrated supply chain approach, and supply chain processes. All right. And so they have 4 levels that they've said to us through answering the questions that these are important to us. And then when you ask them how dissatisfied you are, basically the 3 and 4 come up within the yellow box again, which says you're basically saying you are ready and want to make a change to improve these processes. So a little different persona, little different prioritization profile plan, and then this organization gets an action plan. So again, this company, we said they're apprentices, they need some work. Their strengths at the moment seem to be thinking strategically, and yet from an industry benchmark point of view against other healthcare companies who have supply chain processes, they are considered a laggard. What are the action items? Focus maybe on tactical and operational issues, get the job done. Maybe you want to embrace some global standards, at least one, to get a framework. Maybe you want to develop a risk register, that's what we call it, where you start to codify all your identified and assess risks. It's called good visibility, and we call it the one source of truth, so that no one ever forgets what you did and how you mitigated risk. And then with that, you might want to begin the process of developing risk mitigation processes and enter them into the risk register to be better prepared to handle a tactical, operational, or strategic risk. So with that, we shared 2 case studies with you. I think we have a couple more slides where we'll just give you a couple of recaps of the 4 tiers, especially from a value proposition point of view. So let's take a look at the tiers again. We talked about tier 1. This is a recap. Remember, tier 1 is free. You can get into the tool through our website. We have a couple of URLs, I believe, positioned within the slide deck as well. We talked about a mainstream calculation that was essentially case number 1. You can see the chart again. No matter who you are, you get a chart that looks like this. And then essentially, what are the outputs and what's the outcome? What's the value prop? Well, think of it. You get to assess your mature and immature processes. We advocate you get an opportunity to investigate the immature processes, and you get to reinforce the mature processes, to reinforce and strengthen them. What's the practical practical call to action? Value proposition. Develop an action plan to address the immature processes and get, as Jim said, get all stakeholders aligned to move you forward and improve your processes and your bottom line. So what does good look like in this case? Well, improvements being made and notable increased maturity over time. I'll give you a quick thumbnail sketch. We just got a request from a user who went through the tool 1 year ago for his company. He came back to us. He's getting into the tool again and wants to do the exact same tool assessment to show demonstrated improvement. He feels there's improvement over the last year. He wants to go through, answer the same questions, give different results based on the work they've done over the year, and then show the new chart versus the old chart to his peers, his team, and his execs. So pretty interesting stuff. All right. So with that, we'll move on to tier 2. As a recap, again, it's a business unit perspective. Jim mentioned that we always advocate anywhere from 5 to 8 execs. This is not a one-off. This is a group exercise. We want as many different perspectives as possible. Over on the left-hand side, you see the classical chart, and then you see the strategic, tactical, and operational chart superimposed on top of the as-is condition, the blue, the red, and the green. So what are the outcomes? Well, the output, you get a business unit perspective, meaning 5 to 8 execs from different disciplines, and you get a profile of your strengths in terms of the tenets. What's the call to action? Aligned vision. You get an aligned vision with all your execs to move forward. All right. The value prop, it validates the supply chain process maturity from tier 1. It also gives you a strategic, tactical, and operational profile from tier 2. You talk about alignment, people get engaged. And what does good look like? Your business unit has consensus in terms of strengths and weaknesses to move your organization and your processes forward and improve your bottom line. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jim, and he'll end up giving a few more profiles of the tiers.
Thanks, Greg. So we'll move on to tier 3, which again has 2 deliverables. The first deliverable is that industry benchmark, which is so valuable to compare your company with other companies in your industry. And then from an output perspective, again, you'll understand what your position is within your industry and understanding of your industry relative to the overall best-in-class maturity. And that's a very valuable a bit of information for your executives. From a practical call to action perspective, you've now aligned your mission relative to your industry. So now when you're talking about supply chain management with your execs, you can have that good conversation that is saying, are we better or equal to our competition? What do we need to do to beat the competition? The value proposition here is, of course, you're validating your supply chain process maturity within your industry, and you gain that discussion. Across functional group of people for the alignment of all your stakeholders across your organizations, from finance to sales to production to procurement, all across your organization. And then what does good look like? If you're happy with the position, how can we maintain that position? If you're not happy, how do we get better? Usually we always want to get better. So that's all about the industry benchmark, the first deliverable. The second deliverable is focused on the importance and satisfaction or dissatisfaction, which is calculated in the survey. So we ask that align to each of your 10 tenets or 13 tenets, and we prioritize that, as Greg showed in the spotlight there. And the output of this is you get a business unit perspective on what's important in your supply chain, the business unit perspective on how satisfied you are, and then a ranking of both importance and satisfaction, where you see similarities, where you're operating in that high readiness for supply chain management improvements. That's where you're going to end up focusing. So that quickly gets everybody aligned in your organization on what to work on and what not to work on, which is often just as important. The value proposition here is to validate your supply chain improvement rankings for your company and the discussion about alignment across all your stakeholders. And then what does good look like? Once the team aligns with your ranking, you develop an action plan to drive improvements for sustainability. And if you don't believe the ranking, it provides the forum for you to generate consensus of what's important. So again, this tool is an excellent tool as a precursor for your annual operating plan. And we provide the coaching and consulting aligned to your needs, about 2 days worth of work, 16 hours that we can do virtually to support you and your team for deliverables 1 and 2 to help you gain that alignment. The fourth tier output is that supply chain improvement acceleration playbook. It's a tailored supply chain improvement acceleration playbook to match your business mission. So now you have that binder, so to speak, of exactly how you're going to improve over the next 12 to 18 months. 3 different perspectives of the supply chain. We look at from a practitioner perspective, an accommodation, and a big 5 consulting. So we're looking at it, we're giving you 3 different perspectives on how to improve and accelerate change in your organization. The value prop here is improvements that follow a concerted roadmap that is prioritized to maximize your maturity in the shortest amount of time. So this is all about doing the right things, the right time, and the right way, in the right order. And it sounds easy, but this is where the rubber really hits the road. So what does good look like here? You're improving your weak processes, you're sustaining and fortifying your strong processes. And of course, you're seeing that right to the bottom line and garnering your new market share and improving your position within your company. Here, a lot more coaching and consulting in the order of 32 hours. With that, we want to talk about the benefits that you will receive by following these 4 tiers, and we'll get right into it. When you talk about supply chain management, it's hard not to think about Gartner's 5-stage maturity model, where you move from, on the bottom right, stage 1, where the business units are operating autonomously, to stage 2, where you align the business units into and all your different facilities, and then stage 3, where you're really finding that balance of supply and demand. And then you're talking about everything from everything up until stage 3, it's an inside out mindset. And once you get to stage 3 and beyond, it's the outside in. So you're going from inside out to outside in mindset. So for us, we feel like the tier 1 assessment works well when you're starting. As you enter into stage 1 and you're looking to go to stage 2, the tier 1 assessment really helps, as well as the tier 3, to give you that roadmap. As you get into stage 2 of maturity, the tier 4 assessment provides even more value. And then once you get to stage 3, that's when we would suggest you really start with the supply chain risk and resiliency program. So in other words, if you start with a supply chain risk and resiliency program and you're in stage 1 on the maturity, most likely you're not going to be successful. It's just as simple as that. It's very tough if you haven't built up to understand the principles of supply chain. So we really want to get you ready to indoctrinate supply chain risk and resiliency and accelerate your improvements so that you can move to stage 3 and 4 and be able to optimize your company and create scalable growth in your companies. And then, of course, our overall goal is to get to that scalable, value-centric outcome of adaptable and focused on margin to serve. So we're very aligned to the Gartner. And with that, I just want to turn this over to Greg to show you the money.
Yeah, we'll finish up real quick. We're watching our time, folks. Appreciate you staying with us. But we just wanted to share this. I'm not going to really talk to this one. I think the next slide is a little more impactful for you relative to our tool. But this is what exemplars are achieving in supply chain performance in terms of revenue, profitability, capital utilization, and cost of capital. So before we go to the next slide, which is really geared towards the tool, all right, think of it. If you're in supply chain and operations, the execs are expecting you to improve revenue, improve profitability, improve capital utilization, and improve the cost of capital. All right. So that's a pretty tall order, especially in light of a lot of disruptions and what's going on in the landscape. So I want to share the data that is more aligned, the next slide, with the tool and the tiers that we have been talking about. This is essentially from benefits that you can derive by moving forward and improving your supply chain processes. All right, these come from friends of the consortium. As you can see on the right-hand side, there are 3 columns: laggards to average, average to followers, and followers to leaders. That's what we wanted to finish up with. And then essentially on the left are benchmark KPIs done by, continually done by friends of the consortium. Revenue growth margin, that comes from Gartner and IBF, Institute for Business Forecasting. Take a look at the 3. Top line revenue growth, higher margins, customer delivery. And you can see the improvement as you move through these tiers within the supply chain tool. EBITDA, earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, and amortization. That comes from our friends at Chainalytics. Look at the elements: cost to serve, capital management, increased net pricing. Third KPI on the left, RONA, return on net assets. That comes from Gartner work: less inventory, higher inventory turns, fewer stockouts. And then finally, cash conversion cycle, CCC, free cash. This comes from our friends at Hackett Group. You can see the 3 elements: cash conversion cycle. If you don't use CCC, go out to Wikipedia, find the calculation, and start calculating it for your organization. Return on capital, we all know that, and OTIF, on time and in full. Take a look at those numbers. We wanted to share those with you. This is an open-ended question. What we have seen over the years when you move from one level of maturity to another. We wanted to share that with you. So with that, you'll have it. I'll turn it back to Jim. We'll finish up. Thanks.
Thanks, Greg. It's so important to be able to put value right to the bottom line of indoctrinating a program like this. So with that, we want to talk about how this is all wrapped up into the supply chain management assessment deliverables. We have tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 are giving you different perspectives as far as what those deliverables are, from outcomes to the STO perspective to where you are you are at in your industry and how dissatisfied or important your each of these tenants are. And that turns into objectives, and you're going to have a slew of objectives. And what we do is work with you to turn those objectives into action items. And that's what the playbook is all about. So this is just an overview to give you an idea of how everything fits together. And again, we want to just wrap it up here and says, you know, does it pay to be a leader? I think that's often many, when you do say we need to improve on something, they say, well, does it really pay? Well, what we found, and there's plenty of literature out there that says the companies that are performing within your industry in the first quartile, those are the companies buying other companies. In the second quartile, those are the ones that are rationalizing, and those companies are rationalizing their SKUs, they're hanging on, they're doing all right. And then if you move to the third quartile, those are the companies that are being kind of going out of business, especially in tumultuous times like today, and they're being bought. So if you're in a third quartile right now, you need to be thinking about moving, having positive momentum and moving up. And if you're in the fourth quartile, you really need to watch your back, because you're probably on the bridge of going out of business, or it's due to your competitive landscape. So with that, we want to wrap it up today, and we want to, from a playbook perspective, you know, we want to, please do contact us on any of the tiers. Tier 1, if you have questions about the free assessment, how to use it. We'd love to get your feedback on what's working, what's not working. How do you feel about the process? If you have any questions or on anything on how to set this up, how to sell it to your management, please give us a call. We hope the tips that we provided today are helpful for you. And again, this Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium, email address is there, as well as the website where you can find more information. With that, we'll wrap it up. Greg?
You bet. Thanks a lot, folks, for hanging with us a couple minutes over an hour. We hope we convinced you that global supply chains are in the process of shifting. And so with that tectonic shift on its way, we're also convinced that improving your supply chain process maturity will ensure you can survive and thrive during the next economic downturn and major shift in the global supply chain landscape. So thanks a lot for attending, and all the best in 2023. Jim?
And yes, again, thank you for joining us and staying with us to the end. And we all know that these next 6 to 9 months are going to be very tumultuous. We're hoping that by the end of the year, Christmas rush, that things get back in line. But this next 6 to 9 months will be tumultuous. Having a plan on how you're going to manage this and then take advantage of the growth that we hope to see coming in next fiscal year. So with that, thank you again for joining, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.